SAITO is a project that is aiming to solve the current scaling problem that proof of work and proof of stake blockchains currently have, as well as making blockchain infrastructure open as a standard. But before we get into things, just a disclaimer. I do plan on being compensated with some SAITO tokens for this video, and I have already bought some on my own. But make no mistake, I wouldn't go over a project if I didn't think it could play a critical role in the crypto space. Additionally, this video was not reviewed by anyone, including the SAITO team, before me posting it. Everything in this video expressed are my thoughts and my thoughts alone. And of course, none of this is going to be financial advice. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what is SAITO? Well, as I mentioned, SAITO is a project that aims to combat centralization within blockchain infrastructure, which includes node operators, as well as scalability issues that come with proof of work and proof of stake blockchains. And what they do, more specifically, is instead of paying miners and stakers for making new blocks like they do on Bitcoin or Ethereum, internet service providers are actually paid by the network instead. And because of this, with SAITO, you're actually able to run blockchain dApps or decentralized applications directly within your browser rather than needing to use plugins like MetaMask, for example. And the reason all this is done is, of course, to help Web3 projects, again, like MetaMask, like pretty much any project building towards the inevitable Web3, save money by not having to pay node operators, like in this case Infura, any money since they would have already been connected to the blockchain via SAITO. This, of course, saves money and stops centralization within blockchain connectivity. But what we're going to do is actually kind of delve a little bit deeper into Infura as an example to see what SAITO is really trying to solve here. So if you're unaware, Infura essentially, as I mentioned, is a node operator. Pretty much, it's a service where you pay for them to host an Ethereum node for you. Developers for Web3 apps need this to connect to the Ethereum blockchain so they can read and write on Ethereum. So apps like Uniswap, Compound, even the Coinbase wallet, almost any popular app that you can think of on Ethereum, chances are they're probably using Infura. A good amount of them are. So I guess the question is, what's the big deal? Well, what if Infura's nodes are compromised, right? I mean, if you think about it, if Infura is the one connecting to the blockchain and everyone's relying on Infura's connection, then wouldn't that cause a lot of decentralized apps using Infura to stop functioning? I mean, it kind of makes sense. Well, actually, we don't really have to wonder what would happen because it already happened. Back in November of 2020, Infura was actually locked to an older version of the Go Ethereum client that ran into a consensus bug at a certain block. And all of that, by the way, is fancy talk for essentially Infura was on the wrong fork of the Ethereum chain. And because of this, this caused exchanges like Binance and Bithumb to disable ETH and ERC20 withdrawals. Because honestly, if they were to actually allow them to go through, then they'd be on the wrong chain and nothing would have ended up going well. But even MetaMask, for example, right, which is owned by the same company as Infura, Consensus, was having issues. So as you can see, in the long term, this can be quite an issue if everyone is using one or maybe even two companies to connect to the blockchain. Because again, you're kind of relying on one or two entities for that connection to this permissionless network, which is supposed to be decentralized. But if our connections are centralized all to one or two companies, then there really is no difference. So I guess the next logical question is, why don't people stop using Infura then, right? I mean, obviously, if this is going to lead to centralization to blockchain access, let's just go ahead and host our own nodes. Well, to be honest, it's just because it's convenient. Although technically I can imagine running your own node would be cheaper, I would still think that Infura is a lot easier to set up and you don't have to manage it. They manage it for you. You just pay them a subscription or what have you, and they go ahead and do the rest for you. And the thing is that this kind of goes for anything in life, right? People will always choose what matches their interests short term and think about the long-term consequences later on. It's really just how people are, and it's really not that surprising. But now that we know what can happen when it comes to blockchain infrastructure being kind of monopolized, that kind of shows you where SAITO kind of fits into the equation, where they're able to essentially give any of these different decentralized apps or anyone trying to build infrastructure the ability to just host their own nodes, through SAITO. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at one of their live demos, which is going to be the Saito Arcade. Now, the Saito Arcade is actually one of the community-driven apps being developed on Saito currently, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the only one available, but it's pretty much built to demonstrate the power and flexibility of building apps on Saito. It's essentially supporting the complex interactions required for games and creating a great user experience. It pretty much kind of made the Saito team, as they mentioned here, focus not only on the back end of things to make sure that it works correctly with the Saito network, but also to make sure it looks good on the front end. Because as we all know, if the front end isn't good for any average person to use, then it doesn't really matter what's in the back end because no one's going to be using it. In this case, they got a couple games here. They have a chess. They have one appropriately named Pandemic, which I tried to play. I'll be honest with you, I had no idea how to do it. I think I lost right away. But one thing I did want to mention is that they were actually even rewarded a grant by the Web3 Foundation for bringing this arcade to the Polkadot community and then expanding it to a Web3 standard. And in this case, when they say Web3 standard, I imagine they mean like a rubric for anyone who wants to build their own type of arcade. So it's really interesting. I mean, and again, this isn't like an arcade where it's like you're playing, Space Invaders or anything like that. This is more of like more like a math-based arcade, I would probably say. And they also over here kind of compare themselves to a Steam or Google Play in terms of, making sure that they're actually open source. Meanwhile, Steam and Google Play aren't. I mean, I don't know if they're on the level of games that are on Steam or Google Play. Like I can't play Grand Theft Auto on Saito quite yet, but if I could, that'd be pretty cool. But moving on, what are the tokens for, right? I mean, what are the point of having these Saito tokens? Well, the main point of them is for accounts to spend them in exchange for data services, essentially, right? So it's really just a way to interact with the network, kind of like how Ether acts as gas fees on Ethereum. Really just pretty much fees. It's almost like a tax for the blockchain, right? But they did just have an IDO on PokerStarter and raised right around $400,000 from what I understand. However, you did need to provide KYC information to even be involved in it. And obviously, you already know me. I'm in New York. I can't provide anything. Well, I don't want to provide anything, number one. And number two, they don't allow New Yorkers to get into anything. So I'd actually go ahead and cop my own tokens on a Uniswap. But as I mentioned, Saito is technically part of the Polkadot ecosystem. I did mention that I got the tokens on Uniswap. The only reason that is because the network isn't exactly live yet, quite yet. Technically, I guess you could say it is live. However, it is under active development. And they actually even mention on their website, if you've already bought the tokens, that they don't really recommend you switch over to their main net quite yet. Because, if you do, essentially, it sounds like there's just going to be a whole hassle if they have to, remake the chain or something like that. And we're just going to kind of move on to my thoughts here now. When I first started taking a look at Saito, obviously I was actually reached out to first by the community because I think they were saying that they were, paying influencers or content creators to actually make videos on them. And obviously that intrigued me. But as I looked more into the actual project itself, I really came to see that, they actually had a product, which is really good. And when I say that, I mean, I checked their GitHub out. They had a lot of code kind of already written there. They have plenty of tutorials as well. So in terms of like, if you want to be a developer or whatnot, you can actually go ahead and just start typing up your own code or even contributing to the network itself. And then of course, I love the fact that the whole idea of the network is that it's supposed to be giving back to its participants rather than just giving back to miners or stakers. Because I think that's one thing that is kind of overlooked in this space. And again, I didn't really think about it until I was doing research on this now, is that technically, blockchains, for example, Bitcoin, ETH 2.0, when that comes out, proof of work, proof of stake, you're technically paying proof of work. You're paying miners to uphold the network when they don't have to use it, right? Someone can fire up a mining rig, and they never really have to have any like incentive in seeing the network succeed per se. Like they don't have any stake in the network, right? They're just someone with a mining machine that they can just go ahead and solve equations with, and that's it. In terms of staking, you are technically holding the token. Depending on what the token is in this case, let's say if it was Saito, you'd have to hold Saito, so you technically have a vested interest to see the token succeed or the project succeed. So in that sense, I could see that working. But I do like the fact that you technically participants are getting paid back. Like people who are running this infrastructure are getting paid back in this token. In Saito, obviously, in this case. So I like to see that they have that model working for them. And they're saying that this is actually going to be a lot more scalable than proof of work and proof of stake in the long term. Economically, I could definitely see it for sure. Because to me, again, like they seem to have a lot of different ideas kind of going on here. And I really only touched on that one important Infura one because I know that that's kind of like the main one that they're kind of pushing. But they did mention even in their white paper that they're pushing a lot more ideas than just that. I think they said like 6 or 7. And then in terms of recommendations, number one, I would say I was looking at the Block Explorer. And I know this is very random, but personally, as someone who kind of likes to make sure my transactions are legitimate and back check them and whatnot, I love to see Block Explorer, information just in case I want to see if my transactions send, see if someone sent me a transaction, just to see how the network is looking. I will say that theirs is very bare bones. I mean, obviously, they did mention that it is kind of in testing, like they're kind of working on the mainnet currently. But, that Block Explorer is a little bare bones, bro. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, they could definitely be a little more meat on there, if you know what I'm saying, right? And then the other thing actually I will say, and this one actually caught me by surprise a lot more than anything else, and I would love to see what they have to say about this. Is the patent protection that they have. So if you take a look at their white paper, right near the end of it, they mention that they have a patent protection and that it's been secured on the different techniques, I guess, which is the kind of the main innovations that they're talking about throughout the white paper, which are obviously going to include, automatic transaction rebroadcasting, the golden ticket system, pay split and PoW split, and block golden tickets, secure multi-party voting mechanism, a whole bunch of stuff essentially that they're trying to patent here. And to me, this kind of goes against what they were even saying in the first place, right? The fact that they're trying to build towards an open infrastructure, a Web3 based open infrastructure. Meanwhile, they're kind of patenting stuff to keep others from taking and potentially innovating on it, right? I see where, in terms of like a company's eyes, right? They don't want people to kind of just take their product and sell it for their own. I get that. But maybe they should have gone with a different model in terms of a patent. I don't know. Like, for example, I know Uniswap V3 that's coming out. They have their own type of patent where essentially they're making it where you can't use it for like a year, but then once the year expires, anyone can use it indefinitely. They can just copy it, build on top of it, whatever. I do want to mention though that technically Saito does mention that if you are a blockchain project and you do want to use one of their implementations that they have, to just hit them up and I guess looks like that they'll be able to help you out with that. But I was just saying that like I would definitely like bring that up a little bit more if I were them, because it just seems a little bit like kind of shady to throw it at the bottom of the white paper. You know what I mean? Not to say that they're doing anything shady, but to me, when I look at Web3, when I look at open infrastructure, when we look at crypto, patents are usually looked down upon. But obviously, again, if you're doing something very, at least they deem very innovative, then I get it. But I think the right disclaimers should be put in place. That's all I'm saying. But what do you guys think about Sato? Do you have any issues with their model? Do you think that what they're doing will actually be the evolution of blockchain or Web3? Let me know down below. As I mentioned again, I already have my own tokens that I copped because I do like the idea of what they're going for. Just trying to decentralize everything and move towards that Web3 standard. To me, that's kind of like where I'm at in terms of looking at projects and stuff like that. Whenever someone comes to me with like that kind of idea, just looking for like scaling solutions, anything related to Web3, I'm all ears. So that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one, and y'all have a good one, all right? Peace.